welcome to the fourth branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening. Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the fourth branch program. Welcome to a very special episode of this program, in which today we will discuss the necessity. We said in one of the tweets you may have received, and of course we had banners on YouTube that says it is imperative that we as a country demand the impeachment of Donald Trump. Of course, I know that will create a number of reactions. But let me take you back to why I have gotten to this point and mention the necessity to impeach the 45th President of the United States. By the time there was the fifth debate for the 2016 presidential election, a debate which took place in Las Vegas in December of 2015. I had already written a couple of articles that seemed to favor Donald Trump. The gist of the articles were to support his candidacy for the presidency of the United States. It feels like it's a century ago, but you may not recall that when Donald Trump decided to throw his hat into the ring to become President of the United States, it was a joke. Everybody shrugged it off. It was a circus. Nobody expected Donald Trump, of all people, to be serious about becoming President of the United States, let alone becoming President of the United States. Nevertheless, the articles were favorable to the candidacy of Donald Trump. And during the primaries, I also wrote many articles which seems to favor Donald Trump, arguing especially against those who were ganging up against Donald Trump in order to prevent him from clinching the nomination. You may not recall, but nobody had any love for Donald Trump, at least not in the beginning anyway. And yet, I didn't see any reason not to support his candidacy. And as time went by, it started to become clear that Donald Trump may indeed become the nominee for the Republican Party. Now, that wasn't any surprise to me, because 3-4 months prior, before we even got to South Carolina primaries, I've already written an article that clearly picked Donald Trump as the Republican nominee for the presidential race. All that is mentioned on the People Branch website at peoplebranch.org. It is not just a fib or something that I'm just telling you for the sake of telling you. You can find that out in that site, dated 2015-2016. Get back to our conversation here. So, Donald Trump managed to knock out everybody on his path. And in the process, as he was making his way towards becoming the nominee for the Republican Party, there were a lot of uproars, a lot of sighing, a lot of I can't believe that's happening But in the meantime, his crowds became bigger, larger, louder, raunchier. Just what Donald Trump loves. Huge crowd chanting his name, chanting for him, and supporting him. And the larger the crowd becomes, the more outrageous Donald Trump became. But that still didn't change anything about me arguing on behalf of Donald Trump. And even after Mr. Trump clinched the Republican nomination, you may not recall, but there were a lot of activities at the top, the elite, and most likely those who support the Republican Party must have tried the best possible route to deny Donald Trump the nomination of the party. And you know why. You understand why. Donald Trump is not your typical candidate. And on top of that, it is very clear, or it was then very clear to anyone, that Donald Trump does not have the qualification to become president of the United States. And much worse, he did not live up to that office. His very demeanor, his language, make the office of the presidency almost like walking in a trash can. So nobody wanted Donald Trump as president of the United States. You may even recall that there was a movement called Never Trump. Again, I wrote against that. Now, I took all those positions not because I wanted Donald Trump to be president of the United States, but rather because I believe strongly that in a system of democracy, it is up to the people to elect whomsoever they wish, the individual they think would represent them, would represent their views. As such, I sided with our democratic system, not with Democrats, not with Republicans, but rather with the system or democracy we have, and there are guidelines that must be followed, without which we cannot call this system here a system of democracy anymore. But despite the fact that I so strongly believe that we had to let the system take its course, I was never on the side of Donald Trump, because any logical individual, anyone who is a patriot, would not dream of the idea of having an individual such as Donald Trump become the president of the United States. We already know what the outcome would be. We already know what it would be like. In fact, I wrote several articles to that effect. And we will be talking about that as well as we discuss why it is imperative to impeach Donald Trump. Now, I was on the side of Donald Trump, or rather on the side of our democratic system during the whole process of the election. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the way it should be for every single individual who calls himself or herself patriot. So it has become a point in time, and this is today, in which we are looking at the damage that's done by that same individual, but not without recourse. The framers of the Constitution did anticipate that there would be a time, or there could be a time, that we would have someone like Donald Trump in the Oval Office. So they made provision for that in our Constitution. It's called impeachment. It is a system of democracy after all. And it is necessary that the same reason that I sided with Donald Trump during the primaries, during the general election, because that I strongly believe that we ought to follow our system of democracy. It has become time today to continue to do so. Otherwise, let nobody talk to me about democracy in America. In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies presented to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore. All men are born ignorant. Many have chosen to stay and live in ignorance. Only a few recognize that ignorance is indeed the root and stem of all evil, and made the choice to be ignorant no more. You see, ignorance is the biggest threat to any democracy. It is, however, the ignorance of the ignorance which represent the greatest danger to a society. It is what turns an ignorant man into a lunatic. Thus lies the danger, the peril even of a man, a community, a state, a country, and yes, even a society. John F. Kennedy said that the ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of us all. We've seen it, have we not? We've witnessed it. We're all living it today, are we not? Donald Trump is President of the United States, and that is a great testimony to our system of democracy, because anyone who so chooses can decide to run, to bid for the office of the presidency, and if you can manage to have enough individual to support your idea, whatever that is, you can become president. Now we have had presidents who were incompetent, mediocre, president who could not really know the difference between a left shoe and a right shoe. We have had different type of individual who had occupied the Oval Office. In fact, the reason we keep getting that seesaw move between Democrat and Republican administration is because every so often we, the people, decided that we don't like the way that person ran the country, so we'll change to another one. And we keep going back and forth, back and forth. Now this is how our system of democracy is supposed to work. And thus far, that has worked beautifully. It's not perfect. Everybody would acknowledge that. We may even say it's not even ideal. However, this is what we have. And as flawed as it is, it has become almost a model for the world. Other countries try to copy, try to emulate what we have here. For many decades now, the United States of America has been considered the leader in the world in every aspect. Everyone in the world, or every country in the world, head of state of any country, of every country in the world, always look up to the United States for guidance. It's almost as if the United States set the tone, set the stage, and everybody followed suit until now. Now, you may not care that the world no longer look up to the United States for guidance. You may not care about that. But the United States cannot live in an isolation. But that's not what we're here to talk about, and that's not the reason we say Donald Trump should be impeached, because those are not impeachable offenses. Any president can decide not to want to have anything to do with the world. Although we would prefer the opposite, we would prefer the president to get along with the rest of the world, but that's not an impeachable offense not to. So we cannot condemn Donald Trump for being, well, antisocial, if you like. But what we're here to talk about is the reason that we say we, as a society, we, the people, should demand the impeachment of Donald Trump. And we'll come back to discuss why that is imperative to do so. Why do we impeach a president? Well, if you read the Constitution, there are many reasons to impeach a president, but it boils down to one single thing. Now, there are two aspects to the impeachment. There is the political aspect, and of course there is the, well, constitutional aspect. I wrote a couple of articles before to make the point, to make the case for Donald Trump to be impeached. That has nothing to do with Russia, but rather with the very fact that from day one, Donald Trump took an oath administered by the Supreme Court Chief Justice, in which he swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Remember that? Now, if we were abiding by the letter of the Constitution, if we were abiding by the principle of our democracy, there would be no need for Robert Mueller report in order to move forward in the impeachment of Donald Trump. And the reason is simple. Donald Trump lied to a federal agent, the Supreme Court Chief Justice. He swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Now, can anyone, fanatics or not, claim that Donald Trump had done that? We have held Donald Trump to a very much lower bar than any other president in modern time. The bar has been set so low that I even ask the question as to why anybody care about becoming president. Because this is no longer an inviolable post. Because Donald Trump has made the presidency of the United States something that I don't even see the point. It used to be a post that politicians vie to, because this is the highest post, the highest job you can hold in our government. It was, until before Donald Trump, it was an honor. It was a position that you feel proud to hold. You would feel proud to hold. And that's the reason the occupant of the Oval Office had always held the office to high esteem. Now, that doesn't mean they were all sent, they didn't do anything wrong. In fact, they so much held the office to high esteem, when they did something that shouldn't have been, they try as much as possible not to let that become a public conversation. On the other hand, Donald Trump just trashed the Oval Office. But we're going to get to specific. First, I have to provide you with a few references as to how long I have been watching this predicament evolving right under our eyes. And for those legislative body whose job is also to uphold the Constitution of the United States, simply turn a blind eye and let our democracy being eroded. So Donald Trump is not the only person responsible for the problem. The Republican Party as a whole had simply let things happen. I remember having watched a video of Lindsey Graham making the case to impeach Bill Clinton because it was so disgusting to have a president soil the Oval Office. Between what Bill Clinton did, Bill Clinton's affair with Monica Lewinsky wasn't an impeachable offense. It was obviously a bad behavior of an individual who occupied the highest office in the land, obviously. But it wasn't an impeachable offense. Even Richard Nixon, that I heard sometimes people compare the case that currently evolving under the Donald Trump administration to Richard Nixon. There is no comparison whatsoever. Richard Nixon did something that you could consider domestic. That doesn't mean it was good, it was okay, the Watergate case, but it was purely domestic. Today we are talking about the individual sitting in the Oval Office, and by any analysis, no matter where you look, it's becoming clearer and clearer by the day that Donald Trump was in bed with a foreign enemy. Encouraged the bad behavior, collaborated with, to become the 45th President of the United States. Now the Constitution defines treason as when there is a time of war, if someone were to collaborate with an enemy at time of war. But that's not the definition of treason. That's not the real definition of treason. An American citizen, a president at that, who decide to collaborate with a foreign entity, enemy at that, is a traitor. Someone fanatic, of course, Trump fanatic, I was having a conversation with, and argued the point that we don't have anything that connects Donald Trump with collaborating with Russia. And Republican legislators have made that case as well. But here's where it is interesting that someone, anyone, whether it's a constituent or a legislator, could make a case like that and still think that it's okay that the President of the United States, someone who should be held to a very high standard, but in this case, that's the person that's held to the lowest standard, because it's not okay to say grab a woman by the pussy, but the president says, hey, well, that's okay. Everybody said it. You know, they say it behind a closed door. Seriously? It's not okay for us to, we, the general public, to say certain things, to behave certain ways, but the President of the United States, the person who's supposed to be a role model, can say anything, no matter how outrageous, how ridiculous, how insulting. It's okay. But that's not what we're here to talk about. Obviously, we already said that president can be an ass, and that's not an impeachable offense. But what sometimes triggers my mind thinking about that is the fact that you have legislators, Republican legislators, making a case on behalf and to defend those type of behaviors. So it's not just Donald Trump behaving in a way that demeaning to the office of the presidency. It's the whole Republican Party that simply is not worth taking a second look at. George Washington did warn us about those type of individuals. He said, beware, beware, or be warned rather, of the imposture of pretended patriotism. People who pretend to be patriotic put their hands on their chest and they think that spells patriotism. And once everything is looked at through the prism of politics, then everything is admissible, everything is permitted, everything is permissible rather. And that's the state we are in today. But let's get to the gist of this whole thing that we've been talking about all this time. In the Republican world, Donald Trump is a saint whose only sin is his desire to make America great again. That's his only sin. The desire to make America great again. That's Donald Trump's sin. His administration has always comprised of angels like Mike Flynn, Carter Page, George Papadopoulos, Paul Manafort, etc. It dispatches to carry out his mission. In Donald Trump's world, the devil, the Democrats, and yes, even some Republicans who do not tolerate what Donald Trump is doing, his idiocy, his corruption, his scandal. Yes, the devil is determined to wage war against the holy Trump camp and the faithful soldiers of the Donald Trump army, comprised mostly, of course, we already know of morons, gullible, and deplorable, vow to lead their lives to protect St. Donald from the devil's attack and the fire of the great demon, Robert Mueller. In a world which only exists in the minds of thoughtless fanatics, has it not been for the relentless attack of the devil and his army of demons, Donald Trump would have been the greatest president the country has ever had. He said that himself just the other day. He is the greatest president that the country has ever had. In his argument against the investigation, Donald Trump said, well, why would they do an investigation of someone who is doing such a great job? Why would they? The Bill Clinton administration, the Bill Clinton era, in case you don't recall, was the greatest time, the best time the country had in terms of the recovery of the economy of the country, of the financial aspect of the country. Bill Clinton left. He left the country with a surplus. Now, if Donald Trump's argument was, well, if you're doing such a great job, we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt that, yes, maybe you're doing a great job. If that is your argument, and you can do anything wrong, anything you want, no matter how wrong, no matter how treasonous it is, just because you're doing something wrong, then they should not have any investigation. What does that say about the Republican who went after Bill Clinton when the country was going through the best time, economic time, that is? Doing a great job. The articles of impeachment in the Constitution does not care about whether a president is doing a great job or not. The impeachment is a process which ought to happen every time a president, someone who sits in the Oval Office, gets out of line and the person does things that simply not acceptable. In the case of Donald Trump, it's too many to list. Republican legislators have been for the longest dancing around the issue. Let's wait for the Mueller's report before we make the final decision. Let me ask a very simple question. It is very simple, and anyone, no matter how stupid, no matter how You don't have to be a college educated for you to be able to answer the question. You don't have to have any type of knowledge at all in order to answer the question, because it's so simple. Even a caveman can answer it. With all those things going on around Donald Trump, all those scandals, all those people who are in his, who either were or currently are part of his administration, people who work on his campaign. Now, pretty much everyone around Donald Trump has been involved in some sort of crime, in some sort of corruption, in some sort of scandal. Now, you may not recall, things have been moving so fast that you may lose track of really what's been going on. The first time this conversation about the collaboration between the Trump camp and Russia, you may not recall, but that was complete denial by everyone in the administration. Donald Trump said it, Mike Pence said it, everyone in the administration, everyone around the administration, people who serve in the campaign and people who are still with the administration, everyone denied there was absolutely zero contact, nothing to do with Russia. We're not even talking about other aspects of Trump lies, about Stormy Daniels or other thing that has to do with his business. We're just talking about Russia in particular, because this is what of importance at this point. Now, when with very hard work from a lot of dedicated journalists, found out that it was all a lie. Donald Trump did have, well, at least his team did have some conversation with a Russian at the Trump Tower. Now, remember, no contact whatsoever, no conversation, nothing. Now they found out that there was a meeting that happened. And the argument changed now from absolutely nothing there, we don't have anything to do with Russia, we don't have any contact, nobody in our administration ever did. In fact, if you remember, Jared Kushner did give a brief press conference where he said categorically nothing, I know nobody, I never had any contact with any Russian, and I don't know anybody in this administration that ever did. When the meeting was revealed, the conversation changed to, well, it wasn't really about anything about the campaign, it was about adoption. We were just trying to find, to resolve the issue of adoption. That was pretty amazing, because you have all those individuals, first of all, there was the attorney who actually worked for the Russian government, and you had a number of other operatives who had close contact with the Russian government. They all attended a meeting to discuss, you guess it, adoption. And that was the talking point. The meeting was just about adoption. We were just talking about adoption. You know, we like adopting people. The President of the United States. And as time goes by, we start getting more and more information. So, of course, it turned from, well, yeah, we may have talked about getting dirt on Hillary. So, no contact whatsoever, no Russia. We don't have anything to do with Russia. We were just talking about adoption. Well, you know, while talking about adoption, we may have asked about dirt on Hillary Clinton. And what makes the matter worse is the fact that while everyone now today is saying that Donald Trump has nothing to do with that, we don't see any connection. Now, when you look at the timing of what Donald Trump was saying and the timing of those meetings, unless you are completely stupid and naive for you to say that there is absolutely no contact, Donald Trump had nothing to do with any of that. The office of the presidency has been diminished to having for scandal, corruption, and it's, you know, people who are there are swamp creatures. And ironically, that's what Trump ran on. He's going to drain the swamp. That swamp that was there before Trump was way better than the swamp we currently have. The swamp we currently have in Washington is its stench reverberates across the country. We can smell it anywhere in the country. There is no comparison whatsoever. Donald Trump, I wrote an article to that effect that nothing, and read, nothing that is done on behalf of Donald Trump is done without his knowledge. Period. No if and but. Nothing. Even his children could not undertake anything without him knowing what they were doing. Yes, they had to run it by Donald Trump. Now here's what I asked someone who was making argument to defend Donald Trump. I said, if you have a spouse and all that we're talking about, so far, yes, we have no idea based on the conversation because, as we know, Robert Mueller is not putting information out. But forget about for the moment the fact that the President of the United States should be held to a higher standard. Forget about that. Because we already seen that the Republicans couldn't care less. Yes, if it were to be Bill Clinton, that would be, oh my God, how could we let a president, someone who sits in the Oval Office, do those kind of things? But hey, Donald Trump, he can be in any kind of scandal or do anything that he wants, sell the country to the highest bidder. That's no problem. We just have to wait for Robert Mueller. Now, if you have a spouse and you have all those scandals happening, everything pointing to your spouse, but so far you haven't caught your spouse in doing anything wrong. You have not, because A, your spouse is not stupid, so I'm sure he or she would take a lot of precaution not to get caught. But everywhere you turn, you find that there is some issue with your spouse. The neighbor is talking about it, acquaintances are talking about it, close friends are talking about it, family members are talking about it. I ask the question, would you simply say, well, there is nothing there because, you know, I haven't caught my spouse doing anything wrong? I say, would you? Think about it for a moment. I don't know of any individual here in the United States or anywhere in the world who would have all those things happening around an individual, you have an interest in your spouse, wife, husband, and you have all those things going on, and then for you to simply say, I don't think there is anything there, I'll just wait until I find on my own. I guarantee you that's not going to be your behavior. And yet, it doesn't matter. It's the country. Well, who cares that Donald Trump sold the country to the highest bidder? Who cares Donald Trump slept with our enemy? So think about this for a moment. Who would do nothing, finding out that your spouse, you have friends, family, acquaintances, everyone, colleagues, at the workplace, everywhere you turn, you find that there are conversations about your spouse doing something wrong. Cheating, obviously. And then for you to say, well, maybe you should wait for the Mueller's report as well to find out if it's true. Where there is smoke, there is fire, most likely, or fire about to erupt. There is no need for the legislative branch to be waiting for any Mueller's report, because the office of the presidency should be held to higher standard, not what we currently have today. Now, it's unfortunate that we have both the constituent, the Republican constituent, and the legislators relinquishing their duty to hold the executive branch accountable and thus the erosion of our democracy. Yes, it doesn't happen overnight. When you just turn a blind eye the system no longer works. I mentioned at the top that I supported and defended the candidacy of Donald Trump because I believe it was necessary to make the point that our system of democracy ought to be respected. We ought to go by what our principles are. We cannot just because we don't like Donald Trump or we don't want Donald Trump and say we should prevent him from becoming the nominee of the party or from becoming president of the United States. Personally, that would be the last thing in the world that I would want. But for the sake of our democracy, it was perfectly acceptable. But now that Donald Trump is in the Oval Office and has been working against the interests of the United States, and you don't need to be a genius to see that. He has been, even before he gets to that point, to the Oval Office, he has been working against the interests of the United States. And we have individual after individual being indicted, being sent to jail, and confessing to that very fact. Yes, it is time that the legislative body does what is demanded by the Constitution of the United States. It is time to begin the process of impeachment of Donald Trump. Failure to do so will simply let the erosion of our democracy continue on. For the sake of our democracy, for the sake of the integrity of our Constitution, it is necessary to begin the impeachment of the 45th President of the United States. Enough has been done that has degraded our institution, trampled the rule of law, trashed our Constitution, and yet we seem to be dancing around the issue. The process of impeachment, just like when someone is accused of a crime, the person has to go through a legal judicial process in order to determine the outcome of that accusation. The impeachment process does not necessarily turn into a conviction, a removal from office. Bill Clinton was impeached. He wasn't removed from office. But it is necessary to begin the process of impeachment, because if we do not do that as a country, it's almost like saying that someone commits a crime and it's okay because nothing is going to be done because the person is the President of the United States. When we say nobody is above the law, it is an expression that's worth nothing if we do nothing. For the past 2 years, the Republicans have done absolutely nothing to make certain that the rule of law is followed. It's not because it's the Democrats in power. It is because it is necessary. It is the right thing to do in order to preserve our system of democracy. If we don't do that, we cannot talk about the United States being a system of democracy anymore. When the President of the United States, the individual who is supposed to be held to a very high standard, has done half of what Donald Trump already did, regardless of whether the legislative branch is controlled by Democrats or Republicans, it is necessary to impeach the individual, because not a single individual on the face of this earth is worth the sacrifice of our nation. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Stay with us. We will be right back. Welcome to War on Blacks. It is a topic which discusses race relation in America. We crossed a major bridge in our conversation. It's called the Civil War Bridge, during which we discuss a number of casualties which happened on that bridge. You may recall that we started the conversation explaining that in the midst of the 21st century, we're still talking about racism, discrimination, and both concerned parties, both sides, seems to shy away from, shun the whole conversation altogether. And there are reasons, plenty of reason for that. And we've seen that that does not solve the problem. Because centuries later, beyond slavery, racism, discrimination still rampant in the United States. Welcome. If you're here for the first time, well, War on Blacks is the banner for the discussion of race relation in America. If you have not, at any point in time, if you have not taken a look at this, have not watched this program, we encourage you to take a look at the People Branch YouTube channel. The People Branch YouTube channel is where we have all the previous episode of not only this particular topic, but also all other topics we already discussed, which are archived there on the People Branch YouTube channel. We have acknowledged with this topic that there are two groups of whites: those who are racist and who discriminate, and those who are not racist and who do not discriminate. And that also the reason that the discussion of race relation, or even finding a solution for it, is so difficult, because no one wants to touch that. And blacks usually try to avoid the whole discussion of race relation because blacks are overly emotional about the whole thing. Whether they study history or they intuitively know what's going on, or they experience it. So talking about it would evoke a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. So they rather not talk about it. Whites, on the other hand, they have a different reason why they don't want to talk about it, because they feel they have to be on the defensive. Because they know they, at some point in the history of the United States, their ancestors put blacks in predicament that were inhuman. Now, as mentioned earlier, there have always been two groups of whites, and that also apply for the period during the period of slavery. There were also two groups of whites: those who were pro-slavery and those who were anti-slavery. And that's why at some point we had the Civil War. Now we talk about the Civil War in detail as far as it is related to the aspect of the conversation we wish to continue, which is the race relation. We didn't go back to talk about slavery for the sake of evoking or explaining the predicament that blacks were in, but rather to bring forth what happened there and how that era, that the dynamic, the interaction between the whites and blacks, how that was used to shape our society, which continue to live under the same structure that was established beyond slavery. We use the banner war on blacks. It's because it's appropriate. War suggests casualties. And we have been talking about the various forms of different form of casualties that blacks have been subjected to, from slavery to today. Physical casualties, emotional casualties, psychological casualties, financial casualties. And blacks have been placed in that predicament. The same way that blacks were rounded up from Africa, chained, enslaved, and sold as merchandise across the world, they were put in that predicament. Yes, the current predicament that blacks are in today, it's not any of their making. And as we delve, because we've outlined what was on that bridge. That bridge had hundreds of thousands of bodies laid there dead, and left many other hundreds of thousands of wounded. So that bridge that we just crossed, the Civil War bridge, in case you don't know what that is, the Civil War was fought because there were two camps. The whites who wanted to keep slavery around, and those who wanted to end slavery. That was the reason behind the Civil War. The main reason behind the Civil War. Of course, books have different focus and tell you different stories about the Civil War. But the main principal reason was slavery was accepted by millions of whites and disgusted by millions of others. And to resolve the matter, those who wanted to keep black slaves put their lives on the line to make that happen. As such, we had casualties that even some war that foreign war that we have fought, we did not have that many casualties in those wars. See how far hatred, white hatred for black went. They rather died than accepting that very human principle that they all recite, that they all wanted to abide by, with and by. All men are created equal, except blacks. Maybe that's, they wanted to add that to the constitutions. Now, since I began this journey, I have had my share of individuals who can't wait to shut my mouth. Granted, so far I haven't had any open threat of physical threat. Not that it would matter anyway. Harry Belafonte says, when a black voice is raised in protest to oppression, those who are comfortable with our oppression are the first to criticize us for daring to speak out against it. Yeah. If you watch Fox, whenever a black has been victimized by law enforcement, tune into Fox, and the first thing that you see, that those who protest against that kind of brutality against blacks, automatically, hosts at Fox find those people scandalous. They find them thugs. They consider them out of line because they shouldn't be protesting. You know, they're blacks. When a black voice is raised in protest to oppression, those who are comfortable with our oppression are the first to criticize us for daring to speak out against oppression. You can put Fox in that list because it's always the position that they take. When Trayvon Martin was shot in Florida, you may not remember, but Sean Hannity opened his mic to get Zimmerman to come and talk about how great of a time. He even raised money for Zimmerman. Yes, that's the way racists and bigots are. You can add Sean Hannity in that list. Because it's one thing, and that happened during slavery as well, because those who were pro-slavery, they would rather die than acknowledging what they were doing was so inhuman that they should give it up. Now, it boggles the mind every time that I think about that. The part that always bothers me is the fact that there was not, among those millions of individuals, there was not a single one who could reason and say, that is wrong. Not the priest. Oh yeah, they went to church with Bible in hand to thank God, to praise God. Not the priest, not the pastor. Christian, and we see the same thing happening today. No matter how wrong they are, they would have one Bible in hand and make argument in the other. Christian, evangelical Christian, who voted and continue to support Donald Trump. They were up in arms during at Bill Clinton having an affair. Yes, that's unacceptable. This is the office of the presidency. Nobody should behave that way. Yes, Christian evangelicals. Today, they have the most corrupt individual sitting in the Oval Office. They have no problem with it. Now, I digress. We will continue the conversation about race relation, and because we have crossed that bridge, now we will make reference to some of the some details of what we talked about in the past, especially during slavery time, in order to explain some aspect of what we have today as to why they crossed that bridge along with those who did not die on that bridge. Because the Civil War did cause a lot of there were a lot of casualties. Now, not everybody died, obviously. And I keep asking the question, why didn't everyone who wanted pro-slavery to be around, why didn't they all die? Now, if you want to know and understand my question, you have to go back to the previous episodes, and many of them are currently archived in the People Branch YouTube channel. Again, I strongly encourage you to take a look at the type of treatment that were inflicted on blacks and those who were on that side, pro-slavery, who wanted to keep it around. Now, the reason we're talking today about racism and discrimination, and you're going to see that those individuals who did not die, they crossed that bridge and they carry with them baggages, some of them more deadly than what happened on the bridge. And we're going to confront those issues head on, because talking about slavery, it's past. It's over with. But talking about what we are living today, the predicament, the scenarios, the environment that's left today for us to live, we ought to turn over whatever rock, those hatred, that those sentiment that whites who are racist harbor, and explain and expose rather the origin of their hatred, in order for them to understand that no, blacks are not the problem. Because that's really the biggest issue we have in the conversation of race relation in America. It's blaming the victim. Trayvon Martin got killed. You go to Fox, Trayvon Martin, well, was responsible for his death. Blaming the victim because, well, welcome to George Zimmerman. Let's raise money for him because he needs it. He just killed a black man. He needs to be defended. Police officer unload their weapon on an unarmed black man. Well, they look at it and say, well, I guess it was justified. Everything that happened during slavery, that we thought we left behind, that we thought when we crossed that bridge, that Civil War bridge, we would have left behind and we would have had a different society, not a chance. All of that, whites cross the bridge with all those baggages. And today, the only thing we cannot see the sign, no Negroes allowed, the invisible sign now. It used to be a time where even beyond slavery, that they could put those signs. Now, as humiliating as that was, at least we had a way of knowing where we were not accepted. Today, there is no way of knowing, but the signs are still there. Blacks are still killed, and there is no accountability. With impunity. So yes, war on blacks is not for sensation. It is to point to casualties. And casualties, whites fought the Civil War and they had their casualties on the bridge. And they left that behind. Blacks, not only they died on the bridge, but they continue to die. Casualties continue to mount for blacks. And as such, it is our job, it is our duty to keep pointing to those instances to those situations that simply make it possible for blacks to continue to be victimized. Hi, I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program. War on Blacks is a new topic added to the Fourth Branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relations in America. The goal is threefold. 1. To bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discriminations, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. To extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then, and only then, will we, as a society, be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you. I hope you had some interest in the conversation, and should you have questions, suggestion, comment, criticism, please do not hesitate to contact us. And if you have a topic you would like us to talk about, please send that information to us. We will research it and we'll talk about it here on the Fourth Branch program. Now, if you're aware of some scenarios, instances of racism, of discrimination, send us a link, send us a message. We are compiling not only list of search, but we will also make use of information that are current, information that will help us discuss with modern scenarios, contemporaneous scenarios, what we are discussing, which is race relation in America. That will help greatly to not only debate the topic, but also be able to point to instances that would make it easier for individuals who still have doubt about the widespread of racism in the country, at least to get on board. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. See you next time. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Stay with us. We will be right back. The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.